Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be talking about the expected constitutional package to be presented in the Parliament tomorrow. And this is, of course, coming after we saw a consensus being reportedly achieved between top political parties, including the PMLN, the PPP and JUIF, with regards to changes and amendments within this constitutional package that relates to, more importantly, judicial reforms, among other things. And this is, of course, something that we'll be talking about in terms of the key points and takeaways as part of this package, and what aspects of the judiciary will it be covering and the kind of constitutional reforms that it proposes. Among other things, it talks about the formation of a constitutional bench and, of course, the appointment with regards to the Chief Justice of Pakistan among the three most senior judges. It also talks about the authorities of the Judicial Commission, the Parliamentary Committee with reference to the Chief Election Commissioner, and, of course, other articles including 63A and 48. So we're going to be talking about what this means, particularly in terms of the constitutional setup of the country, and then also whether or not the government has the magic number to actually go ahead with this particular proposal. And then, of course, the response that we'll be seeing from what the PTI has claimed to be a large protest that is scheduled to be held tomorrow. Whether or not, of course, that goes ahead as planned is something that remains to be seen, and so, of course, is the session of the Parliament and what exactly will be the discussion around these amendments. It seems, according to reports and statements coming in by government leaders, that majority of the work has already been done, or a large number of points have been agreed upon already. So it remains to be seen whether that is the case and whether or not we will be seeing any heated discussion tomorrow. So we're going to be taking a look at that, and then also in terms of what this constitutional package actually reflects upon and how it will impact the judiciary, and then, of course, the powers of the judiciary and the Parliament. That is going to be our focus in the first segment of the show today. Our next one is going to take a look at the political situation around the world, particularly with reference to relations between India and Canada. We saw earlier that the Canadian Prime Minister talked about how there is credible evidence against many Indian diplomats and government stakeholders involved in activities within Canada that are against what India terms as dissidents, and also in terms of the safety and protection of the citizens of Canada. And this is important, particularly in the aftermath of what has happened last year with something that the Canadian government believes the Indian government is behind with regards to the assassination of a Sikh separatist leader in Canada. And then, of course, we also saw a similar incident taking place in the US where an attempt was made by a certain leader. So we're going to be taking a look at exactly what this means in terms of diplomatic relations, as diplomats have been expelled from Canada, and in a tit-for-tat move, India has done the same, giving them till Saturday to evacuate. So we're going to be taking a look at the relations, and then, of course, also in terms of the investigation as it continues, and what sort of credible evidence the government indeed does have, and where does that put the countries in terms of their diplomatic relations and in terms of the consequence it has on the credibility and dignity of the democratic country that is India. So we're going to be taking a look at that in our show today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Raja Faisal, and we've also been joined in our studio by Jamshaid Baryar, who's a political analyst. We've been joined online by Barrister Safi, Ghauri, who's a legal expert and political analyst, and also by Muneeb, Qadir, a legal expert. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being part of the discussion and joining us in the show today. And Saif, I'm going to start with you with reference to what we have seen in terms of the constitutional package. It was supposed to be presented about a month back, but it seemed that the magic number wasn't there, which now seems to be there, reportedly, of course, in terms of what we're expecting to see tomorrow. It will be presented in the Parliament, and it seems that PMLN, PPP, and the JUIF seem to be in agreement with regards to that. I want your take on what you think, irrespective of whatever consensus these parties may have about this constitutional package and the way it reflects upon the judiciary.
Thank you for having me on the show today. It's always a pleasure to be on the national studios. Well, the very first thing is that what I firmly believe in is that ultimately, all right, whether you call it magic or you call it parliamentary politics or you call it Maulana Fazlur Rahman coming back into that idea of being very much politically active once again, I think that finally I do believe that the consensus has been reached, and as per sources, this will be tabled onto the floor of the Parliament tomorrow. And there is firm evidence that there will be a considerable amount of debate, but this amendment will go through. That is something that is coming in as forward as news right now. I do think that there had to be a definite balance of power between the executive and the judiciary, and it was long called for. And it's not really the first time we've had amendments like this. There has been a considerable amount of, judicial activism in the country as well, and there has been a considerable amount of political activism too. And somewhere in between, somewhere in the mediation, I think we need to ensure that something that we hold as sacred, the Constitution, needs to prevail at the end of the day. So with the establishment of the FCC, one thing is very certain, that the backlog of cases that are very much overburdening the existing judicial system, that will be resolved, number one. And number second, I think the legalities of the matter would further be explored by Barrister Safi and of course Mr. Qadir. But at the same time, I do believe that it was much called for. Previously, we know that in the past 4 or 5 years, the highest court of law has been subject to a great deal of political debate. So rather than political debate involving the perimeters of the highest body that dispenses justice in this country, I think it is time to wave off that political heat that the Supreme Court has been under. And after the establishment of the FCC and the passing of the 26th Amendment, I do believe that once again the judiciary would actually be focusing or would be centric towards the aspirations that the common people have from the judiciary, that is quick dispensation of justice. This is what I believe in.
Absolutely, and that's extremely important. And Barrister Safi, I'll come to you in terms of helping us understand whether or not that will actually be the case, especially when we talk about empowering the judiciary or having justice, especially when we talk about speedy justice. This is something that is very important in terms of course, ensuring that there is a certain time in which cases are processed, but then also that they are rightly processed. And so I want your take whether or not these amendments that have been proposed, it remains to be seen what happens tomorrow, but I want your take first on whether or not the amendments and the reports that are coming out so far present to you a picture that is going to help and empower the judiciary and help in the dispensation of justice.
Thank you, Sana, for having me on your show. Sana, so I think we're all very, very clear on the matter that politics has been hampering the functioning of the Supreme Court for a very long time. Cases that are of political nature falling under 184(3), many other matters that the Supreme Court ought not to be paying as much attention to as ordinary cases is something that has been a lag in Pakistan. And so by making a new bench, creating this new amendment, a new article 191A that is going to be inserted in the Constitution, that makes for this new bench, which will only be looking at constitutional matters and no other judge can then challenge it, cannot be challenged by anyone else. It's a good step. Let's be fair. It's a good step. It is also considerably different from the previous amendment, which stated then that a new federal constitutional court would be made, that the Chief Justice of Pakistan would be the head of the federal constitutional court. That's not going to be happening. It's going to be 3 senior most judges deciding any 3 other judges of the Supreme Court to be manning this bench, and agree on all ends that there should have been a separate bench for all of this. The problem that I see with all of this is that you don't actually need to amend the Constitution for this. This is something that the Supreme Court very well could have done on its own. The Supreme Court could have passed a directive. The Chief Justice of Pakistan has the authority to make benches of this sort. So he could have made a bench, and there are already benches in existence that are made specifically for specific matters, the criminal benches, the constitutional benches. So a dedicated constitutionally prescribed bench for the Constitution, to me, appears to be somewhat unnecessary. But if the Parliament feels that it is something that needed to be done, I completely agree. That the fact still remains that the Chief Justice of Pakistan and all previous Chief Justices of Pakistan had not done it. They were consistently going around making benches, breaking benches. There was this huge drama around which judge is on which bench. Judges recusing themselves from benches over their political issues and different matters. So on that end, I think it clears up everything. And I think the one thing that it clears more than anything else, and this is what's most important, the entire opposition to any amendment was that this is being done to favor one judge, which is the Chief Justice of Pakistan, and this is being done to target one political party, which is PTI. But that's not the case anymore, right? We can clearly see that the intent was always to speed up justice. This intent was never to extract any sort of political advantage out of this. And this intent is very clear from the new amendment. Because if there was any advantage that could have accrued to Qazi Faiz, well, that advantage no longer exists. If there was in any manner any placement of benches that could have been made that would have targeted PTI, there's no way that can be done. because when we say that the bench will be formed by the three senior most judges, that includes some of PTI's most favorite judges as well. So PTI will have a say technically if we were to believe this whole idea of judges getting influenced by political parties. Then PTI will have an equal say now in which judges become a part of this new constitutional bench. So one thing is very obvious, that all this time that PTI was crying about how this is going to overkill the constitution, all these things are now laid to rest. And I honestly don't know what the PTI protest on Friday is for now, because I just don't get it. Like, what are they protesting for? This is something that they should be very happy about. So if somebody could in fact explain to me what problem they have, I would be very happy. I could learn a thing or two. Maybe Muneeb Qadir knows. I don't know. Muneeb, do you want to help out?
Well, let's ask him. Muneeb, I want your perspective on that as well, and whether or not you're as happy about this package as Barrister Safi seems to be. And I want your take also, especially in terms of the powers and the fact that the Chief Justice's powers have also been curtailed, especially in terms of not having the authority to make changes to the bench. And the fact that whether or not this actually fundamentally will remove the problem of the selection of benches, as many political parties over the years have pointed out whenever such cases come to the forefront. Even if it is the three most senior judges, even if it is the Judicial Commission involved, will that actually eliminate that problem?
And Muneeb, let me say this here, that you are the most suitable person to, of course, talk about these, these constitutional amendments. Reason being, even your name was circulating on the social mediums that you had your input in these amendments as well.
Right. So, the name that was being circulated was actually my father's. And so there has been a rumor going on social media that Mr. Qadir is one of the people who has been drafting the constitutional amendments, but I have absolutely no information in that regard. And this is how rumors work.
I only saw your name somewhere.
Well, by necessary, then by association, they then drag the whole family of the person who's being implicated. So, well, as far as the judges or the judicial powers relating to the, constitution of benches is concerned, we have seen in the last couple of years the judges becoming openly and overtly politicized. We've seen, a breakdown in relations between Supreme Court judges and labels being put onto Supreme Court judges, that which party are they sympathetic towards, which party do they belong to. And these constitutional amendments all boil down essentially to depoliticizing the judiciary. And also to relieve the Supreme Court of its, backlog of constitutional cases, political cases, so that they could focus on the more criminal and the civil cases that they have been putting on the back burner. So to that effect, I think that the amendments which have been envisaged by now the three parties which are in agreement, People's Party, PMLN and JUIF, are much needed. I don't have any issues with the constitutional amendments in essence. And also, the Supreme Court has disposed of PTI allied lawyers' plea against constitutional amendments today, which just confirms that this is within the Parliament's ambit, that if they can muster up the numbers, if they can get the 2/3 majority, they have the power to pass any constitutional amendments, and that is uncontroversial, that ought to be uncontroversial. I think more than the fixing of judicial benches, the constitution of judicial benches, the more contentious areas of these constitutional amendments are in relation to the abolition, of the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court in relation to constitutional petitions. Many do not seem to be happy about it. And when I say many, I really mean to say that those allied with and aligned with the opposition PTI party. Whereas on the other hand, People's Party headed by Chairman Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, they are very much in favor of having a constitutional court. And they believe that a constitutional court specializing in areas pertaining to constitutional cases would reduce the backlog of cases of the Supreme Court and would also depoliticize those judges. But at the same time, there are also alarms being raised over the appointment process of this new constitutional court. It's being said that the first, cohort of constitutional court judges are going to be appointed by the president on advice of the newly appointed Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court, who in his turn is going to be nominated by the Prime Minister. And so there is a concern that a lot of power is going to be vested in the executive in relation to Constitutional Court's judicial appointments. Well, I think that a constitutional amendment to the effect of introducing something like a newly formed Judicial Appointments Commission would have been very good, the kind of Judicial Appointments Commission that exists in Britain, for example. But, well, I think those are moot points now that, the majority of political parties have agreed between themselves whether the magic number, as Sana has been saying here, will be brought about tomorrow and onwards from there on. Now that remains to be seen. All I can say is that the fact that the parliament, if it has the 2/3 majority, brings about constitutional amendments, that is uncontroversial and that should be uncontroversial. You can amend the constitution following certain procedures and mechanisms, and that is exactly what is being done.
Right. And of course, with reference to PTI, Faisal, you're also a very important source in helping us understand what exactly is going on. And I want your expert opinion on that, because while we agree on the fact that the Parliament, of course, gets to debate and talk about whatever aspects or changes need to be made, and it is up to these decision makers and parties to decide what goes on. And it seems, with the opinion of our legal experts, that there seems to be no real problem in the kind of amendments that have been proposed so far. I want your take on what exactly is the PTI thinking then, or where exactly is the problem when we talk about these amendments and the judicial powers that it proposes?
Yes, and obviously PTI thinking or not thinking at all, it doesn't matter at all. Reason being, if we talk about the member of parliaments, I mean, they are not from PTI, still not deemed or considered as from PTI. They are someone who actually got elected as an independent, and after the 63A, of course, we know the 63A chapter has actually allowed everything now. So who knows that all of them, they might be sitting on the treasury side in the favor of the treasury.
But that's according to party policy is what's being proposed.
Yeah, and that is what I was about to say, that when we obviously look at the PTI as a party, of course it would start claiming that they are being forced, they are being cornered in a way that somehow they want our votes and all. But I wanted to add in something which is very important today, and one of the politicians, he actually highlighted in front of me today that there are certain people within the party who have been absent in recent past from any political activity, and now suddenly they have thought of course getting some importance in terms that they themselves are creating some kind of a sort of raid on their businesses in their houses, and portraying as if they are being targeted by the authorities or services or some kind of institution that is behind them. It is not the case. I think this time around they themselves are doing certain things to themselves to portray as if they were being victimized, so that in case if there is a different scenario in coming days, then they can always tell to their colleagues that we have always been around you, see, this is what we have been facing while the victimization was taking place. In here, most important party which I see is JUIF. I have been listening to obviously all of them. I listened to Muneeb, I listened to Barrister Safi and Saf as well. I would differ, reason being yesterday and today I was in touch with someone from within JUIF. Still they are not sure whether they are sitting on the terms of the government, or they have their own terms that the government should be actually accepting it. So to me,
but what of the news conference that we saw just yesterday?
Yeah, just yesterday, in that still, I mean, we don't see anything tangible which actually gives them gives us a sort of hint that yes, they have actually figured out the way and they are going to commit to it.
Do you think we're in for a surprise tomorrow?
Magic.
You never know. It's still a
Real
magical
magic.
day. I mean, Friday has always been considered as a very magical day of the week. So it's tomorrow. It's a Friday, and I'm someone who's fingers crossed and waiting for the time. But one thing is for sure: in Pakistan, in the political spectrum of Pakistan, JUIF once more has shown that it's the most important party, and when it comes to kuch le kuch they are the best one and best placed in Pakistan's political circles.
But don't you think that would have already been done?
It should have been done. The kind of sitting they had yesterday, it was the most important sitting in Lahore. And I was obviously anxiously waiting for the outcome. Reason being, it was right after the SCO summit that all of the prominent leaders of Pakistan, they actually gathered in Jati Umrah, which is being considered as the power hub of Pakistan right now, and including of course Maulana Fazlur Rahman, he was there as well, but not coming the outcome from there that actually raised the sort of bells around me, that why not? I mean, it was the gathering of Pakistan's political spectrum yesterday, and I was obviously expecting that it's all going to be hunky-dory, but to me, I think still we need to wait for tomorrow.
Okay, Safi, I want your perspective on this as well, because we don't know, of course, for sure what's going to happen tomorrow. But in your opinion, do you agree with what Faisal was saying about JUIF, particularly after the news conference we saw yesterday? Do you think that there is more to the picture than what we're seeing, and that even despite whatever deal may have been carried out, there might still be a surprise tomorrow?
Sana, I think that when it comes to Maulana Saab, he's one of the most smartest political entities in this country, and maybe in the recent years, the way he has always handled things in an amicable fashion, I think we need to salute his political vision and his political wisdom, and that is something I think even the worst opponent of JUIF will agree to. I think the way in which JUIF was treated by its a recent affiliation in 2017 and 18, and the way they are giving respect to JUIF today, I think you need to accept that Maulana Fazlur Rahman knows what he's doing.
But isn't that politics?
I think that is politics, and at the same time, I think it's also constitutional wisdom. I think it's political wisdom. One thing I'm certain of, from the trajectory of politics that JUIF has displayed in the past 4-5 years in particular, and the way Maulana Fazlur Rahman has always stood up for JUIF's political interest, and of course for the wider political scenario of the country, I think before doing a press conference he's very certain of what he's going into. So yesterday's press conference by JUIF meant, at least as per my political analysis, that yes, JUIF has got its things sorted out, and I think that tomorrow is a pretty straightforward day and it will be tabled, and I think that JUIF has got what it was really expecting out of this amendment. So therefore, I think…
And what was that?
That was, coming back into the space of political action. They are politically active once again. They're not only politically active in terms of having, talks in the town with opposition parties, but they're also very politically active with the government right now. And I think they are the political favorites at this moment that everyone is trying to bring them in the bargain. And I think that yesterday's press conference at Jati Umrah was an indication of the fact that JUIF clearly knows what it's doing and what it is going into. So I'm not expecting magic within the parliament. I'm expecting the political wisdom by JUIF, and I think this amendment will go smoothly ahead.
All right. Barrister Safi, I want your perspective on JUIF as well, and add to that what Maulana Saab actually referred to in terms of also engaging with the PTI and whether or not he has the ability to charm them also when it comes to this constitutional package.
I do have to admit that I agree with Safi. Maulana Fazlur Rahman has proven to be a political maverick. Now, I always used to think that it was luck, maybe, that he ended up landing himself in positions where he was always required. But for the first time, I do see that he is proving to be a very democratic person as well. The very fact that he is consistently arguing for having everybody come and sit. And I honestly thought that it was a really good gesture by him when he said that, these amendments should also include PTI. Now, this is something that we all agree with. I mean, if we are democratic, we want everyone to come and sit on the table. We want everyone to debate. And that is one of the reasons why I stand against any protest on the street. Why should you be protesting on the street when you could come and sit on a table and discuss what your exact issues are? Why do you need to take people out? Why do you need to burn things? Why do you need to, stop the life of ordinary citizens? So on that end, I do appreciate the role that he has played and the fact that he is proving to be extremely masterful in the sense that the amendments have also changed considerably. I mean, if you look at the first draft versus the draft that you look at now, you see that there has been a considerable departure in the way things are being treated, but the spirit is being maintained and any possible forms of criticism have been addressed. And that is what the beauty of law is. At the end of the day, the whole idea is that you present a draft, then you debate on that draft, you work on it together, and then you create something good which eventually passes. What we are seeing for the first time is very beautiful democratic processes taking place. This is how it ought to be. The very antithesis of good democracy would be that, oh, there's a draft that has been presented, we are going to go and have a nationwide protest. Oh, a second draft has come out, now we are going to have another nationwide protest. How does that help anyone? How does that resolve anything at all? So the fact that Maulana Fazlur Rahman seems to be committed to the democratic process is something that I am genuinely very happy with. And I hope that this amendment does pass. I think that in many ways it brings considerable meritocracy. Now, in the previous question, I discussed Article 191, but there's also another section that is being inserted. It's the change in Section 175A. And that imposes a considerable degree of accountability over the courts. So a special committee is going to be made which looks at the performance of judges who are going to be elevated and put into the Supreme Court. This includes the senior most judges of the Supreme Court itself. These includes parliamentary members, certain senior lawyers. So what we're seeing a committee that is being built, which is in fact truly democratic in the sense that it encompasses everyone from all across. And all of them can sit and decide whether judges who are being inducted in the Supreme Court are truly deserving of this position. Another extremely important change is that so far the Supreme Court has been very different from the bureaucracy, from the military, from all other institutions in the sense that there was just a principle of seniority. And I think this amendment also does away with the principle of seniority and brings in a degree of meritocracy as to who gets to lead the Supreme Court. So we'll see once again another special parliamentary committee that sits and decides who the senior most judge of the Supreme Court will be, which is a good thing because many times we have seen people who are senile, people who have, because of their age, been unable to lead the Supreme Court. But what we need truly gifted lawyers who are proving to be the best on their field, jurists and judges who have really a good history in dispensing justice. They're the ones who should be at the top, and they're the ones who are then the best positioned to reform and restructure not just the Supreme Court, but all the other courts that are below the Supreme Court. So I think this shows that Pakistan has moved forward. This shows that we have learned from our mistakes. Because let's be fair, Sana. We have been discussing that we need changes for a very long time now. We keep talking about it, but now the change, when it has finally come, we can't sit back and criticize it. We ought to give it a chance and we ought to let them implement it in a manner that may benefit us. Now, of course, time will tell whether it's truly beneficial or not.
Absolutely. And Muneeb, I want your perspective on that as well, particularly in terms of the process that through which we've actually come to this stage, particularly when we talk about the powers of the judiciary, the powers of the constitution, the powers of the parliament. It's important to see whether or not the process in itself has been the way that it should be without undermining any particular institution or authority. And add to that, whether or not, of course, we've seen in the past in the ways that PTI has acted and the way that it continues to act, that maybe this kind of political or democratic engagement with the party is impossible. But do you think that potentially this could be something, while we see three major parties talking about consensus, also being extended to the PTI?
I believe that the PTI has already been given the opportunity to present its own draft of the constitutional amendment, by a special parliamentary committee, which is already doing the amendments. So PTI cannot cry foul and cannot claim that there was no input from their side. Now, if they did not or do not wish to engage with the other political parties and they just agitate on the streets, then that's their call and it's entirely their prerogative. But I think it would be misleading to say that the PTI had been denied the opportunity or been deprived of the opportunity to, participate politically in the 26th constitutional amendment process. Also, is this not the same political party which had issues with the Practice and Procedures Act 2023, which was only calculated to bring about, a fairer method of constituting judicial benches in suo motu cases, among other things? So I think that PTI's protests against these constitutional amendments just seem to be a bit too insincere, especially when they don't have much to boast of when it comes to ensuring judicial independence. And interestingly, I was just listening to Safi as well. He's talking about meritocracy being introduced in judicial appointments. And I, for one, am completely in favor of, at least going by the reports, that, the newly formed constitutional courts judges could be now appointed from among legal practitioners and even former judges, rather than, the appointees having to step up from the ladder of among Supreme Court judges alone. So I think that the pool of possible candidates has been widened, and we could get the best of the legal minds on the Constitutional Court benches. And that is the need of the hour, because we need, people who have gained expertise in that particular area of dealing with constitutional cases to be able to swiftly deal with constitutional controversies as and when they arise. But like I've been pointing out, there are certain aspects and elements of the constitutional amendments which are doing the rounds right now and which are deemed to be controversial, and among them are also the provisions or the proposed amendments, although we will see what those amendments are. But it's being said that one of the amendments suggests that no court, neither the ordinary courts nor the newly envisaged constitutional court, shall have the power to examine official actions which would be undertaken under national security laws. And so there's a fear that too much discretion would be vested in the executive by virtue of these aspects of the constitutional amendments. And similarly, the provisions which are being introduced or are reported to being introduced, such as the high court judges, that they can be transferred without consent from one court to another, and that cases can be transferred from one provincial high court to another. These have also raised alarms within certain quarters. But I think everything is speculation. What exactly are the proposed amendments that the main political parties, namely People's Party, PMLN, and JUIF, have agreed upon in Jati Umrah, just when they happily announced having reached a consensus 2 nights ago? That is going to be revealed tomorrow onwards. So until then, I'd say that just we've got to hold our horses and see how things unfold, and we would be in a clearer position to assess what those proposed amendments are and what direction they would go in.
Right, absolutely. Yes, Faisal, you want to
Yeah, one-liner,
Very
Sana, one-liner, and that is that, of course, Constitution Avenue, the most powerful institution or the building is Parliament, because this is where the will of the people lies. And of course, will of the people should be, deciding what the Constitution should be. And when it comes to, of course, Supreme Court is there just to, of course, implement the Constitution and make sure that nothing is going out of the Constitution. And to me, I think will of the people should be deemed, considered the ultimate boss of everyone.
Absolutely. We're now going to move on to our next segment that takes a look at India-Canada relations, particularly when we talk about what has recently happened in the last year, and that, of course, in the investigation that continued and the kind of statements that we've seen coming in from the Canadian Prime Minister about evidence of involvement by Indian government officials in activities that are harmful to the interests of Canada and its people. And Barrister Saif, I'll start with you in terms of your opinion on this, with reference to what we've seen with the way this relationship has continued, particularly since September last year, and how it has evolved. We now see the expulsion of diplomats from both sides. This is something really serious, of course. It talks about the sovereignty and the credibility of a particular nation, and its very inherent relationship with another party. And I want your perspective on what this then means in the larger context for Canada and India, and also for the way that it has consequences for India. So far, of course, with a lot of activities that we have seen, India does not have any consequences, but will it this time around?
Right. So I'm not certain if it will have any consequences. The reason why I think that there will not be any consequences, despite the fact that extremely strong words have been used, despite all of that, I believe that it will still be inconsequential because there are larger geopolitical interests. You know, the USA and Canada need India to be a buffer against Canada, whatever. I mean, those are debates and discussions for another time. But the fact that India was in no unclear terms told that they have violated Canadian sovereignty and that they have committed a crime on Canadian soil. Now the ambassadors were expelled. This is a huge move from Canada. And it's going to have a massive impact on the case that is going on in the US as well, in the South New York District Court, where the chief of RAW and the chief of NSA and everybody else have been summoned. The fact that Pakistan has for a very long time decried India's implicit behavior in crimes all over the world. And India openly boasts about it. There are so many series on Netflix that India makes in which they openly talk about how they go and commit crimes in other territories and how they're so proud of it. They show that as if it's a medal of honor. And then Pakistan has given dossier after dossier, not just to the US and to Canada, but also to the United Nations on Indian confessions of having murdered Pakistanis within Pakistan. There are at least 8 Pakistanis who have been killed within Pakistan by Indian secret agents. We even have the confessions of what's the guy's name, the Kulbhushan Singh, who openly confessed that India has been employing terrorist tactics within Pakistan. So what this does is this finally vindicates Pakistan. It may not have a long-term impact for China and India, but what it does is it vindicates Pakistan's perspective on the matter that India is in fact involved in global terrorism, in global crime. And because of that, countries all over the world who are now being seen as playgrounds for this Indian vigilante justice, wherever they feel like they can go and do it, they will be a little bit more careful. So in the long term, perhaps there will be visa restrictions on Indian citizens. Ordinary Indian citizens will continue to suffer. But I don't think that.
I'd also like to take your perspective, Muneeb. While of course it puts a stronger perspective on Pakistan's stance, and I understand the consequence that it may have in terms of how other countries will be careful or cautious. But as Barrister Safi was pointing out, this isn't something that again will result in a very large consequence or a very large change in the dynamics in which countries engage with India because of geopolitical interests. If that is the case, then I want your perspective on helping us understand how such a big statement coming in from the Prime Minister of a country against another and the involvement of another government in activities harmful to the interests of another country, it's big. But again, this does not have consequence internationally?
I believe that now, at least, initially I used to believe that India was in the good books of the Western world, of the global North. But now, in the past few years, and particularly under the Modi regime, they feel so emboldened. They have this automatic sense of entitlement that they can practically get away with anything. But when a statement comes from somebody who holds the position of a prime minister, and no less, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who, while testifying to a public inquiry just yesterday, stated that India had made a horrific mistake in violating Canadian sovereignty. I do believe that that has repercussions, and that is something that is going to dent India's global standing, because it's not just Canada complaining of such behavior, and certainly not just Pakistan, but even last year, US investigators had said that they had foiled the attempted murder of Sikh activist Gurpatwant Singh Pannam, by an agent working for the Indian government. And that's exactly what the Canadian government has also said, that Indian diplomats in Canada were very much in on, the murder of a Sikh activist on Canadian soil, namely Hardeep Singh Nijjar. So I think that this is scandalous for any government, as it is for the Indian government here, and a violation of Vienna Convention and customary international law.
Right, absolutely. Thank you very much, Muneeb, for joining us, and thank you very much, Barrister Safi, for joining us, being a part of the discussion. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I'll quickly take comments from our guests in the studios as well. Yes, sir. You'd like to say anything on this?
I would simply like to say that you can fool some of the people some of the time, You can fool all the people some of the time, but you cannot fool all the people all the time.
All the time.
Absolutely.
And I think the Indian foreign minister needs to draw a line between what is Bollywood and what is not. International diplomacy is different from the world of Bollywood.
Right, it's a mic drop moment, and I wish I could end here, but I want Faisal's opinion on the matter too. Yes, Faisal.
Yes,
very
Anna, to me,
quickly.
I think it's the most important statement. Reason being, when we talk about, Five Eyes, I mean, when we talk about 5 important countries, English-speaking countries, they don't do it individually. They do it as a team. And their investigation of the Five Eyes, they have actually proven that India is a country that is exporting terrorism to the Western world, especially to the Americas and to UK and Europe. So this is the ultimate truth which is uncovered, and I think in coming future there are hurdles and hindrances for India.
Right, thank you, Faisal. Thank you, Sir, for joining us and being a part of the discussion today. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll now see you tomorrow. Sorry, Dave.